Hey everyone, it's Nathan with the Birds and the Leaves. Welcome. We're so glad you joined us yet again. I'm here with my wife Kim. Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
So if this is your first time listening to us, we are so thankful that you guys are giving us a chance. We're having a lot of fun with this. And if you haven't heard us before, and this is the first time you've turned it on, we ask, maybe go back and check out the previous podcasts. The introduction tells us a little bit about us, and then the first one where we just kind of lay out what we want to do. What we want this to be is a blessing for ministry workers. Like we said in previous episodes, I've been in ministry for about 13, 14 years, almost 15 actually. Kim has been involved in volunteer capacity, but also as a pastor's wife, which we'll get into that a couple episodes down the road, what that means. Tonight, it is May 25th, and that means that school's out for us, and we are only about 3 weeks away from our big summer event that we put on as a church, and that is VBS. And we actually have one other event happening prior to that, but that's an outside organization coming in. But VBS is coming very, very soon, and for me, being a family pastor, this is probably my Super Bowl, and it's the big one. So, Kim, how you feeling right now?
Bring it on.
Bring it on? Yeah.
I won't be saying that in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
but yeah, right now it's great.
Yeah, so we, for most of us, we know, okay, this is the busy time, and we know that there's a lot of good, there's some bad, and then there's also the question of how do you survive during this time? And that's kind of what we wanted to just talk about. Kim, you've been in this with me for 15 years, and that's definitely some mileage and a lot of ups and downs that you've seen with the entire ministry process. So during these busy times, and maybe if you don't have anything, I totally understand. But what are some of the good things that you look forward to in this?
I love seeing kids get ecstatic and happy about just being at church. The idea that they wake up at 7 and are ready to go and excited and have joy. That's a huge, huge part of what VBS is for me, for bringing, not making it scary or overwhelming or adultish. That VBS is for them and they have something to look forward to in the church.
Yeah, one of the things that we find that we have a lot of outside families that come. Some of that is, and you probably experienced this, especially if you're in a kind of a larger town with a lot of churches, is VBS sometimes becomes babysitting, and families kind of VBS hop and go from church to church. And so we do get a lot of visitors. We also, for the church I'm working in, we have the opportunity to work with a after-school program at one of the local elementary schools, and it's actually across the street from the trailer park. And so there are a few families that are low-income families, and this is an opportunity. It's a cheap opportunity, and we scholarship and do all of that for kids to come and be ministered to and have a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, that's a big one, is the relationship that's built with the kids. I love being around teens. I love being around kids. I love the volunteering that our teens get into and the adults. Last year was our first year that I put VBS on at this church. It had been done previous years, but there was a little bit of a break. Mm-hmm. And, you couldn't have asked for it to go as smooth as it did. And having never run the whole show myself, I thought, okay, this is a huge blessing. God came through, because it could have gone terribly wrong. And yet what we saw were pretty amazing moments.
Yeah, overall, we had very little circumstances that popped up that were undoable. Most of them were very easy to overcome and create great experiences within that and moving on.
Yeah, and that does alleviate, some of the stress. It doesn't go completely. I mean, you can tell, and you told me several times during the week, as our theme was basically in the storm, Jesus rescues us. And I remember you pulling me aside at some point and saying, you need to remember the theme of VBS, because in the midst of all the good, it's very easy for us to get short-sighted. And one of the things that I think is part of the good is that this is more than a job. it would be very easy to go in and do a clock in kind of thing and say this is just a job, and you can easily get stressed. But we're dealing with people's lives here, not just spiritual sense, but also their day to day life. We come across a lot of different stories.
Yeah, and it's not just the kids, right? It's the teachers as well, and everything that's going on in their lives and what they are bringing every morning to the table.
Yeah, I know that in fact, a great relationship developed for us, me and you, with one of our volunteers who stepped in kind of a last minute, but became kind of my right hand person. And this has been a great relationship for us and
Yeah.
her. And it's one of those ones where I think we've become very good friends. But we've been allowed to encourage her throughout the year.
Right. So that relationship kept going. Just from that point, we kept engaging, and she's sweet. It's hard not to engage with her, but the ability to just love on her during that week, and that continued.
Yeah, it did. And I think that's the other good that you have to do is you have to look for those moments. You look for those blessings for yourself, not to get wrapped up in the task, but keeping your eye open for things that are going to happen that you have no idea. I can remember at another church, and it kind of slips my mind the details, but walk-ups that came where the family is hurting incredibly. And this isn't just VBS. These are things like Christmas, Easter, your major events that
Right.
happen. This isn't necessarily just week to week, day to day. This is when you're going to have people coming in that are visitors or maybe have never set foot in a church.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we certainly see the gamut of. I would say, honestly, holidays are the hardest for families, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's all the memories. We don't typically have memory issues as far as having great memories with our entire family around VBS. Holidays are hard for families, and they come walking in the door hurting, and it may be the only time they come every year. And you kind of have to do a little bit of resuscitation for their hearts right on the spot.
Yeah, and be ready for that because you don't know when you're going to get sideswiped. I mean, you do get blindsided sometimes with them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, certainly the worst is somebody got a divorce and you didn't know about it, or a death that really came out of the blue type thing.
Well, and they're times a year they do remind them of things. Or you deal
Right.
with children who are in the midst of a family crisis. We have a great group of friends who do a podcast on adoptive and foster families, and a lot of what they talk about is how do you deal with children who have experienced trauma. And we will link to that podcast in the show notes because it's a great one.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of good resources and got a lot of reach with their podcast. Um, so Kim, that's the good. What else can you think? Can you add anything to that, or anything that you can think of that
I think
we've forgotten?
I think it definitely solidifies volunteers. So speaking from a ministry standpoint, often will solidify your volunteers for the following year. So you see who has what skills, where you might have previously not known somebody was a good teacher because all they did was help with curriculum, or it depends on how your system is set up. We've had bathroom watchers to make sure they're all safe or what
Yeah.
have you. But they step into a teaching role, and all of a sudden they're this dynamic, fun, loving person, or they're in a room and all the kids just gravitate towards them for whatever reason. Those are the really cool things that come out of VBS long term, right?
Yeah. And that happens with volunteers too.
Yeah.
They immediately many times say, "Oh, I can't do that," but yet you put them in an opportunity to serve and lead in this busiest of time, and what you find out is they have a gifting that they didn't even know about.
Yeah. Yeah. That is fun to watch and see them grow, and then be able to kind of start picking, what your group is going to look like moving forward for the next 12 months.
Yeah, and in fact, many of the volunteers that I've gotten that were really good volunteers came out of, these big events. And by the way, I just wanted to add something real quick. The podcast we were talking about children with trauma, that's the Empowered Parent Podcast. Ryan and Kayla and our friend Chris, all three of them are our friends. You should check that out. But anyway, going back to the volunteer situation, and we tend to panic because we can't find volunteers. And so as part of that bad, there tends to be this worst case scenario thing that goes through our brains, and I'm guilty of that. Really, really, really guilty of that, as
Hmm.
Kim will tell you.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things that you have to just begin with in any major time or busy time in ministry is just to spend the time praying. And we neglect that
Yeah.
because we feel like we can muscle through things. But really, what it comes down to is if we are serving the Lord, then we have to be dependent upon Him in everything that we do. And that seems like, basic stuff.
Hmm.
But if you think about it, how many times do we just immediately default back to just getting the grind work done? And so then,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
to be fair, I mean, you look up on Pinterest, which I know a lot of pastors do and a lot of leadership does. You look up on how to run VBS, and very few of them rely back to let's start with prayer. That is should be the
Yeah.
cornerstone.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's often the thing that I forget the most, especially
Mhm.
with volunteers. You're trying to
Sure.
get them all in the right place, and
Yeah.
I've been called out several times by volunteers. Hey, we need to pray,
Hmm.
and it's like it's a little embarrassing when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think that's certainly one thing we can do a lot of times is completely neglect the personal spiritual life, and that
Right.
quiet times or however you do that, they go out the window, and I think that does contribute to the exhaustion.
Oh, yeah.
Because many of us will say, and I have friends that we've all said it, is like, oh man, Easter weekend we're just dead, and we take that day, that Monday off, which I think rest is good.
Yeah.
But during the week during that weekend where we're just whipped and emotionally
Hmm.
exhausted. But I wonder how much of that is just because we haven't spent that time. Maybe it's in the Word, maybe it's in prayer, and that can physically affect us.
I think this is a good chance to speak into the elders that hopefully listen to this as well, or maybe catch one or two of these that we put out. That it is so important for the elder board to be praying for those who are on staff, or it's for some churches, this will be a volunteer capacity. Um, that are doing, because a lot of times elders don't have the capability to come at night or during the day or what have you and volunteer. But for them to be steadfast in their prayer is so important for that staff during that time.
Yeah, 100%. We're blessed with a great elder board at our church, and they definitely do that. In fact, they actually volunteer quite a bit. And that's one thing you'll run into, especially with daytime programming, special events
Hmm.
that happen during a weekday. Often people find it difficult to be able to volunteer because of work schedules, but
Yeah.
that prayer side of it, or maybe some kind of support, meals for the pastoral staff.
Amen.
Yes. For those who are really kind of in the high leadership role, they're still having to work their lives around this.
Yeah.
One thing I can appreciate about Kim is she thinks that way, and so oftentimes when there's an event that we're not directly involved in, she steps in to make sure that those things are covered, or at least ask the question, "Do you need anything?" And I think that's sometimes forgotten. Though we experienced it the other night, we had some good friends who called us over
Yeah.
and said, "Hey, we want to make dinner for you because we know you're getting ready to enter this crazy 3 weeks."
Yeah, that was a tremendous blessing on or for us, to be able to just sit down and mostly just laugh and engage socially with people when we know it may be 6 weeks before we are able to truly sit down and rest.
Yeah, I think that's something people often forget is that our interactions primarily during this time tend to be work focused or
Yeah.
volunteer focused or task focused. We don't often get just time to sit down and talk to people normally and be friends, and we miss that. And we'll talk about this later. The fact of being in ministry is people definitely look at you differently.
Yes, expectations are completely different from what they would be most of other people in our experience.
So, if you're out there and you're volunteering or you're supporting, you may not have to volunteer directly, but, that care of your leadership during these busy times, that's a huge thing. And I'm going to say this and just kind of be blunt. Don't underestimate or neglect to understand that they are incredibly busy. They're not corporate workers. They're not big business people. And I know that a lot of people fly and spend their time doing that. But, the thing about ministry is, while it's not maybe a lot of travel, there's an emotional investment, essentially into your family, this church,
Mm-hmm.
this body. And so those difficult times, it could sometimes be like, wrestling with the baggage that comes with your own family, your personal family.
Yeah, because while we are serving the church, our home life still keeps going, right? Our kids, what they struggle with, their personal, um, venture into Christ and how they behave on a daily basis, all those things don't stop. We're still dealing with them. The laundry still gets dirty, the toilets still have to be cleaned. All those things keep going.
Yeah, and when problems arise, many times, um, it can be it can weigh on you heavily. A true story that happened to me was having a parent meeting one time, and it had been a really difficult time at the church. We were going through all sorts of internal turmoil. There were many things happening that the congregation members didn't see. And in a moment, I say transparency, but I learned that not often do you share these things. I shared how difficult it was.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was a kind of an emotional moment. And I remember one of the volunteers coming up and basically telling me, you need to suck it up because my husband travels, all week long and he's tired. And he does more than you. And, you just got to be careful. You have to guard yourself against that because some people don't understand. Some
Right.
people miss that. And, that's where it's important to have those friends and family and spouses who do get it.
Right. Yeah, I think it is very important to have. And this is where last time we talked about a little bit about having friends outside of the church. That can be a huge blessing the week of VBS.
Yeah, people who just get that it's tiring
Yeah.
and don't want to
Yeah.
talk about,
Curriculum or
attendance
sets.
numbers or whatever.
Yeah.
They just want to go, hey, how you doing? I'm like, man, I'm pretty whipped this week, and it was a hard week. And they go, cool. Why don't you come sit and hang out with us? And
Yeah.
those are important, and many times those are the biggest heroes that we have
Yeah.
because they have no connection to it. They don't have the emotional baggage, or they don't hear the stories, or
Right.
if there's turmoil within your church, they're not part of that. They're removed from that, and so that's a nice break.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So we talk about some things to survive. The biggest one, this is Kim,
Hmm.
this is your thing,
Yeah.
always your thing, is plan ahead. These things are going
Yes.
to happen every year. You're going to have Easter.
Hmm.
You're going to have Christmas. You're going to have camp or VBS or whatnot.
Hmm.
And so to be caught off guard by that seems to be a little problematic because,
Yeah.
we're told to plan ahead. How else do you plan ahead for these, Kim?
So I've seen it done multitude of ways. It can be anywhere from very expensive to not expensive at all, but it is time consuming. So for us, typically, I have meals set aside for the week that are basically freeze and thaw or use the crock pot or whatever that meal might consist of. But there's 5 of them to get us through the week. Some friends just say, we're going to go out to dinner every night. End of story. But we're a pastoral family, so that's not something we can necessarily do every night.
Yeah, meals out aren't always in the budget.
Right. So, easy meals that we like to do are taco soup for the 4 of us. A regular recipe of that normally lasts us 2 nights. Even just grilling out, having the meat purchased at home so I don't have to go get it with the sides, that's great as well. So yeah, anything like that that's easy. Or, I mean, let's be real, cereal is dinner
Yeah,
sometimes.
for us, definitely it's dinner. One thing I'd throw into that, and this kind of feeds into the other point I wanted to make. One of the things to prepare for is have a daily cutoff time.
Yeah.
Especially, we're getting ready to go in VBS. That's a half day program with some prep for the next morning. We're doing all this work into the run up. But at some point, you have to make a daily point where you say, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And I used to sit and work all night long
Right.
and that did us no good until you really kind of forced me into that.
Yeah.
And so, 3:00, you're done. You're not
Yeah.
going back up there. You're going to be back up there at 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
You're done. And, for the meals, that's important because now I can be present at a meal. I can
Right.
come home. We can play with the kids. We can go swimming. We can do all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Just to unwind and relax. And I think
Yeah.
the biggest unwind we can have is time with family. And so definitely you need to make this like get your work done,
Mm-hmm.
but you also need to realize that if it ain't done,
It's okay.
you got to do it without it. And that's
Yeah.
one of the other big ones I've had is, if it's go time and you don't have something, it's go time.
Yeah.
And you can fret about it, you can worry about it, or you can just work around it.
It's amazing how God takes care of all those little details that need to be fixed.
And I wonder how many times people get focused on those details instead of what's happening right in front of them. And so they worry about what could have been,
Yeah.
what you could have had, instead of looking at what you actually do have and saying, we can work with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, nobody really notices. Nobody
Right.
knows what's
Right.
missing except you.
They don't.
And they think this is all part of the plan. And so there's no point in sitting around in the after hours worrying
Right.
about what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, I'm not saying neglect, looking ahead and saying, okay, I need to be up.
Well, really, it comes down to being present, right?
Yeah, you got to be present.
You're at where you're at, and you just need to move forward with it.
Yeah. And, those times to get rest, to get sleep, take a nap. There's nothing wrong with that because you need that in order to be, like you said, present in the coming days.
So I think that's an important topic as well, where you're talking about rest and napping. One of the things we've done in the past almost 3 years now, is we plan something very simple once VBS is over. So it might be we have lakes all around us, and we might just go head over to one of the beaches that are at one of the lakes. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be long, but something that does not have to do with VBS.
Well, and you bring up a good point because I know a lot of people, as soon as that big event's over, they run straight into vacation.
Right.
But vacation has its own stresses. It has its own,
Yeah.
things that, planning that kind of, if you're not rested before that, you're not going to enjoy it.
Right.
And so I like what you do with that is let's pick something small.
Yeah.
Let's pick something that we can just take a day to breathe.
Right.
Maybe 2 days, be at home. Because that's really the one thing we want to do.
Oh, yes, please.
In these busy times is we just want to be home.
Yeah.
Home is our safe place. Home is where we can rest the best.
Right.
And so to be able to do that is vitally important. And so I would say, in those situations, don't plan the big vacation right after that. Give it a week, give it 2
Yeah.
weeks. But you need time. And the other thing is people run out the door straight to vacation. There's an assessment time that happens after these.
Yeah, we've had some of our best discussions about VBS 2 days after. So
Yeah.
1 day of rest.
Get your brain back.
Yeah, get all the fog gone. And then spend the day with maybe even a volunteer. It depends on your relationship with them. But spend some time over dinner or whatever
Yeah.
and say, what did we do wrong?
What did we do right?
What did we do right? And what was so funny we almost peed our pants?
Yeah, and so you have to be able to do that with the time you're given. And so again, the rest, the decompression from that is important. Don't
Yes.
plan things right on top of each other.
Right.
Like now in our case, we do have an event that's 3 weeks ahead of VBS, but we
Right.
don't run it. We just show up and it's run by somebody else, and we're not even actively involved. We're providing space and feeding people. That's simple.
Yeah.
It doesn't cause any stress. But when you do, I know churches that do 4 or 5 things in an Easter weekend.
Yeah.
And, Easter is supposed to be a time to rest as families and to worship and to celebrate. And when you're running, I get ministering to the community, but when you overdo it, you're not good to anybody.
Well, and that doesn't allow for any of the staff to rest either, right?
No.
I lay that on elders for not helping make sure that is a safe place for staff to make sure that they get the centeredness that they need around that event.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing we have to remember as leadership, not just elders, but senior pastoral staff.
Yeah.
We need to rest, but we also need to make sure our people rest. And
Right.
we can't run them into the ground just because this is our one time of the year to, get the Creasters, the Christmas and Easter people.
Yeah.
You know what? We're going to do our best. God takes over from there.
Yeah.
We're just there to speak truth. We're there to be clear about it and let God work the rest of it. But if we're just killing ourselves,
Yeah.
there's no joy, there's
Yeah.
no happiness, there's just exhaustion,
Mm-hmm.
and we miss those moments with people.
So I do have two other things that I think are important. One is we always, this is very basic, we always make sure our house, we really kind of live a minimalist, if you want to call it, lifestyle, but we make sure our house is kind of clean and pulled together, and we make sure all the laundry's done. I know that's super simple, but
Yeah, and I would say we live minimally compared to others. I wouldn't say we're
yeah.
pure minimalists.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, we're not.
we're not pure minimalists, but getting those things, that is one thing we don't want to stress about. Now, it
Yeah.
used to be that Kim was directly involved in a lot of those big events, but
Yeah.
she's got a job that takes her out of the house now, so she's not allowed to do that as much.
Right.
And so one of the things, even within as busy as I am on my end, we try to mutually help one another so that, we're not coming home to this disaster. So
Yeah.
the both of us are under pressure.
Right.
But we want to alleviate as much of that as possible.
Yeah, if you're a pastoral wife, I guess I should say partner, because a lot of staff for children's ministry is going to be a husband as well. I actually encourage spouses not to volunteer, especially if you have kids. It does two things. One, it frees you up if you have kids and something happens to either, like if they get sick or what have you, you can then take them home, take care of them, go to the hospital, however serious it is, you're free. But two, it also allows that space for you to take care of your spouse.
Yeah, and that's important as well because you want to be on the same team.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah.
Wow, that seems like we're scratching the surface on this, but there's so much
VBS
more.
is so big, right? I mean, it's a huge part of our year.
Yeah, and that's just our context. That's our big event. We know
Yeah.
that there are so many others that you guys are doing out there, and
Yeah.
you guys are doing a great job out there.
Right.
But our big thing, again, what we want about this podcast is just to encourage you and care for you guys because we know what it's like to hit those low points where you just are wiped out or emotionally not around, or maybe even you're just so emotional that maybe it comes out as anger or depression. Too many of our ministry workers are coming down with severe depression and stepping
Yeah.
out when
Yeah.
they could be cared for.
Right.
And then it's too late, or not too late. It's never too late, but it's gotten to the point where they've got to step away from ministry because they've never dealt with this.
Self-care is important.
Absolutely.
And recognizing that and having that team of people that hold you accountable for how you're behaving, especially weeks like this, whether
Yeah.
it's Christmas, Easter, VBS, camp, whatever. People you can vent to and be real and honest, and
Yep.
people who can do the same back to you, and you hear it and you think, ooh, yep,
Yes,
that is
exactly.
something that has to be changed.
Yep. Well, Kim, do you have anything else on this subject, or do we want to just take some time maybe down the road and
I have
revisit it?
so many more things about this subject, but this is a good,
This is a good time to maybe bring it
Yes.
a little bit to a close, and we can get into
Yes.
more detail later.
yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we thank you guys for coming and listening again. This is the Birds and the Lees podcast, a podcast for ministry workers. If you check the show notes, we'll have links to our website where you can kind of follow us. We're hoping to get an Instagram soon, some email contact information that you can reach out to us if you so feel like it. But again, we thank you guys for listening, and we look forward to talking with you again. Have a great week.